In the heartland of Webster, South Dakota, on January 31st, 1939, the intricate tapestry of a life marked by darkness began to unfold. Meet Jerome Henry Brudos, the younger of two sons born to Marie Eileen and Henry Irvin Brudos. From the very beginning, Jerome's existence carried the weight of his mother's unfulfilled desire for a daughter, leading to a tumultuous upbringing. Marie's disappointment cast a long shadow over Jerome's early years, with emotional abuse and belittlement becoming the unfortunate norm. In this documentary, we explore the stark contrast between the maternal neglect endured by Jerome and the adoration bestowed upon his older brother, Larry. As we traverse through the Brudos family's modest and pious lifestyle, the complexity of their dynamics comes to light. Henry, despite his short temper, stands as a relatively non-abusive figure in contrast to the harsh and matriarchal presence of Marie. Jerome's quest for maternal acceptance leads him to form a unique bond with a compassionate neighborhood woman, becoming a fleeting source of solace in the midst of his turbulent childhood. The narrative takes a darker turn with the sudden end to these visits, as health issues plague the woman, leaving Jerome yearning for connection. Tragedy strikes again when a childhood friend succumbs to tuberculosis, further shaping the contours of Brudos' troubled psyche. This documentary sheds light on Jerome's unremarkable and sickly childhood, marked by throat pains, migraines, and a stark contrast to his academically achieving and popular brother. Despite his role as secretary-treasurer of a youth club in his early teens, Jerome remains a largely unnoticed figure during his high school years. The Brudos family's nomadic existence, driven by Henry's seasonal work, adds another layer to the unfolding narrative. Moving around the Pacific Northwest, they finally settle in Salem, Oregon, on farmland that becomes the backdrop to Jerome Henry Brudos' formative years. Join us on a chilling exploration of the important details that shape the enigmatic life of Jerome Henry Brudos, a man whose story is woven with threads of tragedy, neglect, and the unsettling origins of a disturbed mind. In the quiet town of Salem, Oregon, a dark tale unfolded during the late 1960s. Jerome Henry Brudos, a man later infamous as Jerry, emerged as a malevolent force, leaving a haunting legacy as the lust killer and the shoe fetish slayer. This is the chilling chronicle of his reign of terror. Between 1968 and 1969, Brudos perpetrated heinous crimes that shook the community to its core: the abductions, rapes, and murders of 4 young women. 2 others narrowly escaped the clutches of this elusive predator, whose crimes were characterized by a disturbing blend of brutality and perversion. The scenes of Brudos' atrocities were carefully selected: the confines of his car, the basement, or the garage workshop of the 2 homes he occupied during that ominous period. Strangulation was his method of choice, leaving an indelible mark on each victim. However, the horror didn't end there. He meticulously photographed his victims before and after death, and some endured the grotesque fate of post-mortem dismemberment. To unravel the origins of Brudos' twisted desires, we must journey back to his troubled childhood. At the tender age of 5, an incident involving the teenage daughter of a family friend planted the seed of his fixation on women's shoes and feet, setting the stage for a lifetime of deviant behavior. Another pivotal moment occurred when Brudos discovered a pair of leather high-heeled shoes in a local junkyard at the age of 5. His attempt to bring these forbidden items home led to a horrified reaction from his mother, marking the beginning of a tumultuous relationship and setting the stage for a troubled adolescence. By the age of 7, Brudos' dark inclinations manifested in a brazen attempt to steal his first-grade teacher's high-heeled shoes. When confronted, he could offer no explanation, foreshadowing the troubling path he was destined to tread. As puberty dawned, his deviant interests expanded to include a fetish for women's underwear and lingerie, influenced by a neighborhood boy with older sisters. This dark journey into eroticism became a defining feature of Brudos' adolescence, as he shamelessly stole underwear from unsuspecting female neighbors, sometimes even donning the stolen items himself. The seeds of a disturbed mind had taken root, growing into a monstrous force that would terrorize Salem and etch Bruto's name into the annals of infamy. Brutos began stalking local women in his early teens, several of whom he discreetly photographed. He also stole and retained numerous items of lingerie and footwear. However, none of these initial offenses were violent in nature, although by his mid-teens he had begun developing violent fantasies of forcibly possessing a woman. At the age of 16, Brutos dug an underground tunnel and alcove close to his family home. This alcove was created to symbolically enact the developing fantasies within his mind regarding captive women. And he spent numerous hours within this lair at age 16 mentally hoping to entrap a captive. Although no women were confined at this location, Brutos did lure a neighborhood girl to his bedroom to facilitate his sexual fantasies at age 16. Almost immediately upon luring the girl to his bedroom upon innocuous purposes, Brutos exited the bedroom, only to reappear minutes later wearing a mask and brandishing a knife. He forced the girl to strip naked before proceeding to take several photographs of her before fleeing. Minutes later, Brutos reappeared wearing his original shirt and with his hair in disarray and a minor scuff mark on his cheek, claiming the intruder had locked him in the family barn at knife point. Within a year of this first known violent offense, Brutos had established a pattern of abducting girls his own age or younger, typically at knife point, and forcing them into a barn upon his family farm before ordering them to disrobe before photographing them. He would then lock these girls in a corn crib before reappearing several minutes later, wearing different clothing and with his hair combed in a different fashion. He would then release the girl, explaining he was Ed, Jerry's twin brother, and feign shock at her account of her ordeal before asking, "He didn't hurt you, did he?" Brutos would then claim his twin was in therapy. This is going to set him back a bit, before pleading with the girl not to inform anyone of her ordeal and promising to locate and destroy the camera Jerry had used. None of these girls were subjected to physical sexual assaults beyond tentative fondling, and all apparently agreed, as none are known to have informed authorities of these experiences. On one occasion in April 1956, Brutos persuaded a 17-year-old girl to accompany him on a date. Upon driving the girl to a deserted road, he ordered her to undress. The girl refused, whereupon Brutos dragged her from his car and proceeded to beat her, breaking her nose. The girl's screams and the general altercation attracted the attention of a young couple driving by who stopped and intervened. Brutos lamely claimed the girl had fallen from the car before changing his story to claim the hysterical girl had been attacked by some weirdo he had overpowered. His story was not believed, and the couple drove the two to the nearest police station, where Brutos admitted attacking the girl but claimed that his intention had been to simply intimidate her into removing her clothes in order that he could photograph her. He denied having ever committed any previous acts of this nature and insisted his temper had simply gotten the better of him. Arrested upon charges of assault and battery, a subsequent search of Brutos' bedroom revealed his extensive collection of female clothing plus numerous Polaroid photographs of teenage girls, one of whom they were able to identify. The girl was contacted and revealed her ordeal at the hands of Jerry's twin brother the previous August. Brutos was remanded in custody to be referred to the Polk County Juvenile Department. In the aftermath of his disturbing actions, Brutos found himself treated as a juvenile offender and was subjected to a series of psychiatric evaluations at the Oregon State Hospital. Arriving at the facility on April 16, 1956, he spent a 9-month period there, allowed occasional leave to attend high school. Throughout his stay, Brutos underwent a battery of evaluations, revealing a diagnosis of depressive tendencies and a schizotypal personality disorder. Notably, the assessments concluded that while he wasn't grossly mentally ill or plagued by delusions, Bruto's unsettling sexual fantasies were deeply rooted in a profound hatred he harbored toward his mother and women in general, providing a glimpse into the disturbing psychological intricacies at play. Following the completion of his psychiatric evaluations, Bruto's returned to his parents' home. As a student, he maintained an average academic record, graduating 142nd out of 202 students from Corvallis High School in 1957. In March 1959, 2 years later, Bruto's enlisted in the Army, specializing in communications technology. Despite excelling in his chosen field, his military service earned him a reputation among fellow soldiers as a fantasist, repeatedly claiming involvement in a casual sexual relationship with a beautiful Korean girl, who supposedly visited him every night. Bruto's Army tenure ended in October 1959 when he was deemed psychologically unfit for military service and discharged. Returning to Corvallis, Oregon, he moved back into his parents' two-bedroom home and secured employment as an electrical engineer at a local radio station. Despite his proficiency, colleagues noted his apparent lack of ambition for career advancement, though they regarded him as an eminent and conscientious employee with a mild-mannered demeanor. During the years Bruto shared a residence with his parents, an arrangement unfolded where his mother permitted him to occupy the second bedroom while his older brother was away at college. However, when his brother returned home, Bruto's was relegated to sleeping in a shed at the rear of the property. This dynamic within the family structure offers a glimpse into the peculiar living conditions that shaped Bruto's early adulthood. On one occasion in approximately 1960, Bruto's observed a young woman wearing revealing clothing. He discreetly followed this woman to her Salem apartment, where he strangled her into a semi-conscious state before fleeing with her shoes. This woman was not raped. Shortly thereafter, Bruto's observed another attractive young woman wearing high-heeled shoes. He attempted to overpower and strangle this woman. However, this individual fought back, and Bruto's fled the scene with only one of her shoes. He retained the footwear of both women in the shed, frequently sleeping with the attire. Bruto's was not arrested for either of these offenses. About a year into his employment at the Corvallis radio station, Bruto's encountered a 17-year-old girl named Ralphine Schwindler. Their introduction occurred through a teenage boy, an amateur electronics enthusiast, who frequently visited the radio station to observe and ask Bruto's questions about his work. In a lighthearted exchange about Bruto's shyness around female colleagues, he jokingly suggested to the youth that he find him a girlfriend. Surprisingly, the teenager agreed and took Bruto's to Ralphine Schwindler's home, initiating their acquaintance. On September 30th, 1961, Jerome Bruto's and Ralphine Schwindler embarked on their marital journey. At the time of their union, Schwindler was 1 month pregnant. The newlyweds initially settled in Portland, Oregon, later establishing their home in a quiet Salem suburb during the summer of 1968. Over the course of their marriage, the couple welcomed 2 children, a daughter named Teresa, born in 1962, and a son named Brian, born in 1967. To bolster their family income, Bruto's engaged in occasional vehicle repairs within the confines of their family garage. Bruto's is not known to have committed any sexual offenses during the early years of their marriage. In May 1967, as his wife was in hospital giving birth to their second child, Bruto's discreetly followed a young woman wearing attractive high-heeled shoes to her home. He waited until nightfall before entering her apartment, whereupon he proceeded to choke her into unconsciousness. Then he raped her before fleeing from her apartment with her high-heeled shoes. The following year, Bruto's was arrested by Corvallis police while on the grounds of an Oregon State University women's dormitory. He was charged with stealing women's clothing and was wearing pedal pushers, high-heeled shoes, and women's underwear at the time of this arrest. In January 26, 1968, Jerome Bruto's encountered Linda Catherine Slawson, a 19-year-old door-to-door encyclopedia saleswoman from Aloha, Oregon. She inadvertently entered Brutos's property, mistakenly believing she had an appointment to potentially sell an encyclopedia to the homeowner. Seizing the opportunity, Brutos feigned interest in purchasing encyclopedias and lured her to the basement of his home upon learning the reason for her visit. Once in the basement, Brutos brutally attacked Slawson, bludgeoning her about the head with a section of wood and then manually strangling her to death. He concealed her lifeless body beneath the staircase in the basement. Exploiting the temporary absence of family members, he asked his mother to take his daughter out for hamburgers, providing him the opportunity to engage in necrophilia with Slawson's body. Upon undressing Slawson's body, Brutos discovered she was wearing attractive red lingerie, which inspired him to retrieve a collection of women's underwear and footwear he had acquired, often through theft. He proceeded to dress and redress her body in varying footwear and lingerie, documenting the disturbing process through repeated acts of necrophilia. Hours later, Brutos used a hacksaw to sever Slawson's left foot from her body, preserving it in the family freezer located in the basement. This macabre trophy served dual purposes, both as a model for his extensive collection of high-heeled shoes and as fuel for his disturbing masturbatory fantasies. Additionally, he retained the two encyclopedias Slawson had hoped to sell as keepsakes. To dispose of the evidence, Brutos bound the remaining part of Slawson's body to a heavy cylinder head and callously discarded her remains over a rail somewhere in Marion County, unable to recall the exact location. The horrifying events surrounding Linda Catherine Slawson offer a chilling glimpse into the dark and twisted psyche of Jerome Brutos. In the chilling events of November 26, 1968, Jan Whitney, a 23-year-old motorist, unwittingly crossed paths with Jerome Brutos. Driving home from a job in Lebanon, Brutos saw three individuals stranded beside a broken-down rambler along Interstate 5 between Salem and Albany. Brutos later claimed that Whitney's murder, much like Slawson's, was a crime of opportunity. Seizing the chance to offer assistance, Brutos inspected Whitney's car and convinced her that he could fix it with the necessary tools from his home. Whitney, accompanied by two hitchhikers she had picked up earlier, agreed to go with him under the condition that the hitchhikers would be dropped off first. After dropping off the hitchhikers, Brutos drove Whitney to his home, ostensibly to retrieve the tools. Once at his home, Brutos, hiding his sinister intentions, discreetly entered the rear of the vehicle as Whitney remained in the passenger seat. He then instructed her to close her eyes and describe how to tie a shoelace without moving her hands. Agreeing to the challenge, Whitney became unsuspecting prey as Brutos strangled her from behind with a leather luggage strap and proceeded to rape her inside the vehicle. Subsequently, he carried her lifeless body into his garage workshop, where he dressed her in varying footwear and lingerie, engaging in repeated acts of necrophilia. Whitney's violated body hung from a pulley in the workshop ceiling for 2 days, as Brutos admitted to desecrating her remains whenever he felt the need. Her body, adorned in different lingerie, became the subject of disturbing photographs. Brutos also attempted to sever one of her breasts for use as a paperweight, but this gruesome idea was abandoned when the epoxy hardener failed to set properly. Instead, he stuffed the breast with sawdust and affixed it to a wooden board. Brutos recounted an eerie incident 2 days after Whitney's murder when a car crashed into his garage, creating a hole in the wall. A responding policeman, hindered by dust, debris, and darkness, failed to notice Whitney's mutilated and suspended body due to the hole being at ground level. That night, her body, tethered to a section of scrap railroad iron, was callously discarded into the Willamette River. Alongside it went Slawson's severed foot, which had already begun to decompose at that stage. These unsettling events exposed the dark and twisted actions of Jerome Brutos, revealing a disturbing narrative that unfolded in the shadows of his macabre world. In a harrowing incident on March 27, 1969, Karen Elena Sprinker, an 18-year-old Oregon State University chemistry student, became the victim of Jerome Brutos's horrifying actions. Abducted at gunpoint from a parking lot outside a Meyer and Frank department store, she was on her way to meet her mother for lunch. Brutos, dressed in women's clothing at the time of the abduction, impulsively drove his station wagon into the parking lot after observing a young woman wearing high-heeled shoes and a miniskirt. Failing to catch up with this individual, he returned to his vehicle only to spot Sprinker exiting her car and walking toward the department store. Forcing Sprinker at gunpoint to enter his vehicle, Brutos promised not to harm her. According to his account, Sprinker pleaded with him not to hurt her, expressing a willingness to comply with any request as long as he spared her life. Curiously, Brutos inquired about her virginity, to which Sprinker, admitting she was a virgin and menstruating, was forced to undress before becoming a victim of sexual assault on the workshop floor. After the assault, Brutos compelled Sprinker to pose in different high-heeled shoes and underwear while photographing her. Subsequently, he bound Sprinker's hands and placed a rope around her neck, lifting her from the ground. Tragically, Sprinker succumbed to this brutal act. In the hours that followed, Brutos engaged in disturbing acts of necrophilia with Sprinker's body. He went further, severing her breasts to create plastic molds with the organs. That evening, her lifeless body was tied to a 6-cylinder engine component and heartlessly cast into the Willamette River. The disturbing saga of Karen Elena Sprinker exposes the darkest depths of Jerome Brutos's heinous crimes, leaving an indelible mark on the annals of criminal history. In April 1969, Jerome Brutos embarked on a series of attempted abductions, creating a wave of fear in the community. On consecutive days, he targeted 2 young women, both of whom managed to escape and courageously reported their terrifying ordeals to the authorities. The first victim, 24-year-old motorist Sharon Wood, encountered Brutos in the basement stairwell of a Portland parking garage on April 21, 1969. Wood felt an ominous tapping on her shoulder and turned to find Brutos pointing a pistol at her face, sternly ordering her not to scream. Despite Brutos' attempt to restrain her with an arm lock, Wood fought back tenaciously. She bit and kicked her assailant, twisting his wrist as she diverted the pistol muzzle away from herself. In a final act of defiance, Wood bit deeply into Brutos' hand, causing him to slam her head into the concrete floor before hastily fleeing the scene. The very next day, Brutos targeted 15-year-old schoolgirl Gloria Jean Smith. Smith was coerced at gunpoint to accompany Brutos to a green Volkswagen Karmann Ghia. Brutos assured her, "I want you to come with me. I won't hurt you. I won't rape you." He grabbed the rear of Smith's coat, but upon her plea, he agreed to let go as she walked alongside him. When Smith spotted a woman working on her front lawn, she seized the opportunity, yelling and running toward the woman, causing Brutos to flee from the scene. Smith provided a detailed description of her abductor, noting he was in his early 30s, approximately 6 feet, 1.83 meters, tall, weighing 200 pounds, and wearing dark glasses. Law enforcement diligently investigated all known sex offenders matching this description, but ultimately eliminated them as suspects in the unsettling attempted abductions by Jerome Brutos. Linda Dawn Sally, a 22-year-old removal firm secretary and part-time Portland State University student from Beaverton, Oregon, became the next tragic victim in the disturbing chronicles of Jerome Brutos. On the fateful afternoon of April 23, 1969, Brutos abducted Sally from the grounds of the Lloyd Center shopping mall. Sally, having purchased birthday gifts for her fiancé, was returning to her vehicle when Brutos, deceiving her with a fake police badge, claimed she was being arrested for shoplifting. Despite her protest of innocence, Sally reluctantly agreed to accompany Brutos to his vehicle, where she was informed of a fictitious kidnapping for ransom. Driving towards his home, Brutos parked inside his garage and directed Sally to follow him across the yard, believing his family was away. However, An unexpected appearance by his wife disrupted his plans. Bruto signaled Sally to remain still while he went inside to join his family for dinner. Returning to the garage, Brutos found Sally had partially freed herself from her binds but made no further escape attempts. Resisting Brutos' attempt to place a leather strap around her neck, Sally questioned, "Why are you doing this to me?" In a struggle, she scratched and kicked Brutos as he lifted her from the ground with the leather strap. Despite her resistance, Sally soon lost consciousness, and Brutos proceeded to strangle her to death while committing a heinous act of rape. Following her death, Sally's body was hung by the neck on the same workshop pulley used for previous victims. Brutos attempted a disturbing experiment, inserting hypodermic needles into her rib cage and running electrical currents in an attempt to animate her lifeless body. Disappointed by the lack of results, he abandoned the macabre experiment. Retaining Sally's body for 24 hours, engaging in necrophilia once, Brutos eventually bound her to a vehicle gearbox and callously discarded her in the Willamette River. In a chilling sequence of discoveries that sent shockwaves through the community, on May 10, 1969, two fishermen stumbled upon what appeared to be a substantial parcel drifting beneath the surface of the water in a shallow section of the Long Tom River. Upon closer examination, their grim revelation unfolded. A bound and bloated body, shrouded in a coat, was weighed down by a substantial gearbox, intricately entwined with copper wiring. A sinister tableau crafted with the precision reminiscent of an electrician trimming electrical lines. The lifeless form was identified as Linda Sally. Despite the advanced state of decomposition, a subsequent autopsy failed to conclusively determine whether she had been subjected to sexual assault. However, the coroner unequivocally attributed her death to strangulation. Moreover, needle marks encircled by burning were discovered on each side of her rib cage near her armpits, inflicted posthumously and adding another layer of horror to the narrative. A mere 2 days later, an underwater search and recovery unit made another grim discovery: Karen Sprinker's lifeless body, positioned approximately 20 yards from the initial find. Similar in eerie detail, she too was tethered to the riverbed, this time by a 6-cylinder head, using the same cord and copper wire found on Sally's body. The cause of Sprinker's demise mirrored Sally's: strangulation. The macabre twist emerged as both of Sprinker's breasts had been severed post-mortem. Strangely, Sprinker was found wearing the same green skirt and sweater she had worn on the day of her disappearance, with a size 38D bra, significantly larger than her actual size, crudely filled with brown paper toweling, perhaps in a ghastly attempt to simulate a much larger breast size. These discoveries painted a gruesome tableau of brutality and perverse attention to detail in the haunting saga of Jerome Brutos. Unraveling the twisted tapestry of tragedy, investigators faced a daunting challenge in connecting the dots between the deaths of Linda Sally and Karen Sprinker, seeking the elusive common thread that could lead them to the perpetrator responsible for these heinous acts. Two glaring similarities emerged, forming the cornerstone of the investigation. Both victims had been bound with the same brand of electrical flex, and both had been callously weighted down with automotive components. A chilling indication that the killer may possess a background as an electrician or mechanic. Launching a meticulous inquiry, officers cast their net wide, questioning employees and proprietors of garages and junkyards across western Oregon in an attempt to trace the origin of the ominous car components. Simultaneously, investigators delved into the lives of Sally and Sprinker, interviewing their family members and acquaintances to unearth any potential clues. A pivotal breakthrough surfaced during police questioning of Sprinker's fellow students at Oregon State University. Disturbing patterns emerged as several female students disclosed receiving phone calls from a man claiming to be a Vietnam veteran, seeking dates under various aliases. Most had wisely declined or abruptly terminated the calls, but one student, moved by a sense of pity, had agreed to a date with this mysterious man. The man, identified as Caucasian, in his late 20s or early 30s, slightly overweight, with thinning blondish-red hair and freckles, had left an indelible mark of discomfort on his date. A dirty station wagon strewn with children's clothes hinted at a domestic life, possibly a marriage. The chilling revelation occurred during the date when, sensing the student's unease, the man callously invoked the specter of the two girls found in the river, casting an ominous shadow over their encounter. As the date concluded, he audaciously asked why she had changed her mind and agreed to join him, prompting a response tinged with curiosity. His reply, laden with sinister insinuation, echoed through the night. "How did you know I wouldn't take you to the river and strangle you?" The investigation now teetered on the brink of uncovering a dark and disturbing truth. The unfolding investigation into the grim murders of Linda Sally and Karen Sprinker took a pivotal turn when the student, despite her resolve to avoid further encounters with Brudos, received another call from him 1 week after the discovery of Sally's body. On May 18th, as Brudos eagerly approached their agreed rendezvous for the evening, law enforcement swiftly moved in, apprehending him in the shadow of the darkened truth. During police interrogation, Brudos willingly provided his correct name, age, and occupation, but strategically concealed his true address behind a web of deception. Released due to a lack of legal grounds for detention, the investigation delved deeper into his sinister history. Background checks unveiled a disturbing pattern of physical and sexual violence against women, while a meticulous exploration of vehicle records exposed his residence in the vicinity where Linda Slawson had last been seen alive. The unsettling proximity continued as investigators uncovered Brudos' current residence just blocks away from the department store where Karen Sprinker had been ruthlessly abducted. Although Brudos did not own a Volkswagen Karmann Ghia, a key piece fell into place when it was revealed that his mother possessed such a vehicle. Adding a layer of suspicion, Brudos had been in possession of the car on April 22nd, the very date of the attempted abduction of Gloria Smith. The pieces of the puzzle converged when Smith positively identified Brudos as her assailant. Armed with compelling evidence, law enforcement obtained a crucial search warrant, setting the stage for a meticulous exploration of Brudos' property and, potentially, the revelation of dark secrets hidden within. The documentary narrative now stood on the brink of exposing the intricate layers of a disturbed mind. 8 days following Brudos' initial apprehension, on May 26th, law enforcement executed a comprehensive search of his property. Within the confines of his garage, a chilling inventory unfurled before the investigators, a trove of women's lingerie and footwear, a meticulously compiled list of phone numbers belonging to sorority houses and college girls' residences, and an unsettling collection of Polaroid photographs depicting young women. The haunting images captured a macabre reality. Some subjects were visibly alive, while others lay in an unmistakable state of demise. The garage, a chamber of horrors, served as the backdrop for most of these disturbing snapshots. A profoundly disturbing revelation emerged as several photographs featured a lifeless woman suspended from the garage pulley, positioned over a mirror laid flat on the floor directly beneath her feet. In one haunting image, the mirror reflected Brudos himself, holding the very Polaroid that had frozen these grotesque scenes in time. One of the identified individuals in these ghastly visuals was none other than Karen Sprinker, presented in a state of vulnerability, adorned only in high-heeled slippers, her countenance a complex interplay of fear, contemplation, and apparent resignation. The living room held another macabre artifact, a severed female breast, meticulously coated with epoxy, silently bearing witness to the unspeakable acts committed within those walls. The investigative puzzle began to crystallize as authorities uncovered a coil of copper wiring identical to the one used to bind the lifeless bodies of Linda Sally and Karen Sprinker to engine components before their gruesome disposal in the Long Tom River. A length of rope, meticulously tied in the same fashion as that used on the victims, further cemented the grim connections. Engine components, scattered and concealed throughout the garage, added to the unsettling tableau of evidence. In the wake of these discoveries, Brudos found himself plunged into the harsh spotlight of constant surveillance. The documentary narrative now teetered on the precipice of unveiling a sinister realm, inviting viewers to peer into the abyss of a disturbed mind and the horrors concealed within the walls of that seemingly ordinary suburban garage. In late May 1969, the accumulating evidence surrounding the attempted abduction of Gloria Smith provided investigators with the grounds to apprehend Brudos. Highway patrol officers uncovered him concealed beneath a blanket in the rear of the family station wagon as it traversed toward Portland, with his wife at the wheel. The following evening, Brudos, grasping at desperation, reached out to his wife over the phone, imploring her to eradicate any lingering incriminating evidence. Her refusal marked a pivotal moment in the unfolding drama. Facing a second arrest, Brudos found himself under intense scrutiny, both from law enforcement and the growing weight of damning revelations within his garage. As investigators delved into the missing and murdered young women, including positively identifying Whitney, Sprinker, and Sally, Brudos initially resisted, dismissing the mounting evidence as circumstantial. However, under the sustained pressure of questioning, he gradually began to reveal the depths of his dark desires and their profound impact on his life. By early June, Brudos had laid bare a full confession to all 4 murders, providing a chilling narrative to police and later, psychologists. He retraced the opportunistic slaying of Linda Slawson, expressing an eerie detachment to the name, and proceeded to detail each subsequent murder and attempted abduction. While accepting responsibility for his heinous acts, Brudos displayed a certain resistance when pressed on the motivations and premeditation, confessing, "There must be something wrong with me." Despite denying a hatred for women, he acknowledged that these acts provided a release, a way to let off steam. Photographs taken by Brudos were conclusively linked to the victims found in the Long Tom River, cementing the connection between his narrative and the grisly discoveries. His detailed description of Whitney's abduction aligned sufficiently with the circumstances surrounding her 1968 disappearance, confirming her as his second victim, while Slawson initially remained known as a Jane Doe. Appointed an attorney named Dale Drake, Brudos faced formal charges on June 4, 1969, for the murders of Whitney, Sprinker, and Sally. Despite entering a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, psychiatric examinations unanimously deemed him sane, clearing the path for a trial scheduled on June 30th. However, on June 27, 1969, just days before his trial was set to commence, Brudos delivered a stunning twist by formally pleading guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder before Marion County Circuit Court Judge Val D. Sloper. The judge sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms with the possibility of parole, all to be served in the Oregon State Penitentiary. Brudos pursued multiple appeals, all met with resounding failure. Despite Brudos's persistent claims that his wife was unaware of his crimes, she was indicted on August 7, 1969, for the first-degree murder of Karen Sprinker. These charges originated from an eyewitness account alleging Ralphine's involvement in forcing a blanket-covered young woman into their property on Sprinker's disappearance date. Ralphine vehemently denied any knowledge of the crime, and the eyewitness account was contradicted by other witnesses during her September 1969 trial. Ultimately, she was acquitted of all charges the following month, leaving behind a dark and perplexing chapter in the annals of criminal history. During his years behind bars, Brudos transformed into a seemingly exemplary prisoner. By the 1970s, he undertook clerical duties and later leveraged his electronics expertise to manage the prison's computer records and install a cable television network. Additionally, he earned the responsibility of maintaining and stocking prison vending machines. However, his status as a convicted sex offender exposed him to several physical assaults by fellow inmates, which he endured without divulging the identities of his assailants. Brudos managed to maintain a disturbing connection to his deviant desires while incarcerated. Despite restrictions, he was allowed to order mail-order catalogs featuring women modeling high-heeled shoes and underwear. These materials became a dark source fueling his erotic fantasies and disturbing masturbatory activities. Parole hearings punctuated Brutos's imprisonment, with family members of his victims consistently advocating for his continued incarceration. On June 21, 1995, he received the solemn declaration that he would spend the remainder of his life behind bars. Nevertheless, Brutos continued to face informal parole hearings every 2 years until his death. Even within the confines of prison, Brutos displayed a chilling lack of remorse. In interviews, including one with former Detective Jim Burns, he callously equated his concern for his victims to the value of a crumpled piece of paper, showcasing a profound absence of empathy. Psychiatrist Michael H. Stone identified Brutos as a psychopath, underscoring his callous demeanor and lack of remorse. Brutos's life sentence came to an end when he succumbed to liver cancer at 67 years old on March 28, 2006. At the time of his death, he held the dubious record as the longest incarcerated inmate in the Oregon Department of Corrections, serving nearly 37 years. News of Brutos's demise elicited a mix of emotions from those connected to his heinous acts. Jan Whitney's younger sister expressed a profound sense of relief, crying not for Brutos but for the enduring impact on their family. Detectives like James Stovall shared a sentiment of good riddance, recognizing the demise of a true monster. Brutos's arrest had far-reaching consequences for his family. His wife, Ralphine, faced charges of being an accessory to murder, despite Brutos's claims of her ignorance. The children were placed in state care, and Teresa Brutos, age 7 at the time, was subjected to questioning during her mother's trial. Following her acquittal in October 1969, Ralphine regained custody, divorced Brutos, changed her name, and relocated, severing all ties with her husband, who professed love for her until his death. Curiously, Brutos was never tried for the murder of Linda Slawson. Although he confessed and provided photographs, insufficient real evidence prevented a trial. Jan Whitney's body was found in the Willamette River 1 month after Brutos's conviction, while Linda Slawson's body was never recovered. The scars of Brutos's deeds endured, haunting the lives of those touched by his atrocities.